Well, good morning, everyone, or I guess good afternoon. Thank you for joining me from our regular updates from Washington. If this feels like Groundhog Day to you, it feels that way and more to me. We're in another week of the Trump and Republican-induced shutdown. The president is paying so little attention to this shutdown that he's running around Asia. I thought he was going to put America first. And the House of Representatives is now on, I think, its longest paid vacation in modern American history, which is not a good sign when we should all be at the table negotiating to get the government open, to make sure that we don't have this health care cliff. We know Virginians have started to receive these notices. We know that November 1st is the day they start shopping for health care. This doesn't have to happen. We can deal with these subsidies, prevent this health care cliff, and get the government open. And if this wasn't bad enough, what's also happening is that we know SNAP is running out. Now, SNAP is food assistance. And remember, the Republicans already took a giant whack at food assistance in their big ugly bill this summer. And now to have these benefits expire, 42 million Americans, hundreds of thousands of Virginians, particularly when we all know that grocery prices have gone up double digits. I mean, Donald Trump was supposed to lower the cost of groceries. Instead, they've gone up. We all know, if anybody's bought candy for Halloween, how much more expensive it is this year than last year. There is a way to avoid this. Here's the hypocrisy. The Trump administration laid out a way for $6 billion of ag funds to be repurposed to make sure that SNAP benefits don't end. They could have done that. That's what they've done to try to pay the troops. Well, let's do the same to make sure people don't go hungry. And I will be putting forward a unanimous consent agreement later to say, all right, guys, you all say you want to support SNAP. Let's go ahead and take the administration's plans that they laid out and make that the law so that nobody has to go hungry. I understand Virginia's found a way to short-term, but these short-term fixes only last so long. Let's end the shutdown. Let's end the health care cliff. Let's get in a room and get this done and stop putting Americans and Virginians through so much pain. So with that, why don't I turn it over to Valeria and be happy to take your questions.
Senator, the first question today is from Devlin with the Virginia Pilot.
Good afternoon, Senator. How are we doing this afternoon?
Good.
So I wanted to ask you about whether you've been in contact with Governor Youngkin about how state money will be distributed, when or how quickly regarding covering SNAP for the state of Virginia, and whether there's been any discussion of how much money that will take.
Yeah. I have not had a direct conversation recently with the governor. I don't know if my I think my staff has had some contact with, we stay in regular contact with state agencies. I understand the governor's going to be doing a press conference shortly, so maybe we can get some more answers. I'm glad we've found some short-term relief in Virginia, but this begs the question. We ought to get the government reopened. We ought to make sure this SNAP cuts don't take place in the first place. And we ought to make sure the health care cliff is avoided. And I'm going to at least force the matter on the SNAP benefits later today when we say, let's go ahead and take the administration's plan. I think they've got roughly $6 billion that they'd set aside to pay these SNAP benefits. If it was their own plan, the only reason they're not doing it would be, it appears that, one, they've not liked the food assistance program from the beginning, and that was evidenced by the billions of dollars cuts that were made this past summer on the big ugly bill. But now they're trying to inflict more harm, I guess, for political purposes.
Senator, the next question is from Mitchell Miller with WTOP.
Hi, Senator. Thank you very much for joining us. Wanted to ask you a question about the Democrats have been pretty solid together on this for close to a month, but are you concerned that with the issues related to SNAP, another week with federal employees in the military not getting paid, and the growing issues related to air travel, that could overshadow your message and your push to get negotiations related to healthcare matters.
Well, Mitchell, I'd also point out that in the last few days, Virginians have received their notices. I think I shared with you last week that there was a breast cancer survivor in Virginia Beach that was seeing her premiums more than double. She didn't know how she can afford that. And obviously, as a breast cancer survivor, she can't go without medical coverage. I think that is a crisis as well. All of this is imminently solvable. I think it could be done in a couple hours in a room. But my fear is that even though there may be some efforts to pay individual parts of the government, and I'll take a look at those, but there's going to be no real Republican plan unless Donald Trump's in the room. That's unfortunate. It further diminishes Congress. But as you know, Mitchell, I'm part of every bipartisan gang. My fellow Republican gang members have all kind of said, hey, we can't do anything without the White House sign-off. And I don't think we're going to get the White House sign-off with Trump gallivanting around Asia. That is not putting America first. That is putting America last, and Americans are going to pay the price for that.
Senator, the next question is from Leanne with WCYB. Liam, are you there? Okay, we're going to move on to Mariah with WRIC.
Hi, Senator. So with the largest federal worker union calling on Democrats to reopen the government, have you changed your stance that federal workers want you to vote against the Clean CR?
Listen, I think federal workers want to get paid, and I know there is a bipartisan effort that Chris Van Hollen and Ron Johnson are working on right now that would pay all federal workers, which, by the way, is the law. They shouldn't have to suffer through the president's intransigence. So let's see how those efforts, I think, will get a readout later today. I want federal workers to get paid. I also want them to get back to work, but that requires as well the president to sit down and meet with us on health care. Because one of the things that we have to be also cautious about, and I know I've heard from a lot of federal workers on this topic, that if you do reopen government and then Trump continues to do these what's called reductions in force, RIFs, or starts continuing to fire people, illegally, as one court has stated, then that's not in the best interest of federal workers either. This can all be resolved, but I fear it's going to take the president in the room.
The next question is from Coulter with WTKR.
Senator, thanks as always for taking time to talk with us. I wanted to get your thoughts on the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, ordering the Norfolk-based USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group from the Mediterranean, where it's been stationed for several months, to the Caribbean. Do you support that decision, and do you worry that this is going to further escalate tensions between the United States and South America?
Well, I am worried about this order because I don't think the administration has been clear enough on what their goal is here. I mean, we all know that we want to end fentanyl traffic and drug trafficking in the United States. The vast majority of these drugs actually don't come out of Venezuela. They come out of Colombia and Ecuador. We ought to be doing more interdiction there. And while I've had classified briefs on this, they promised me their legal reasoning. And if these are boats with known criminals and drugs on them, they would strengthen their case if they interdicted them and showed the public, both here and throughout the Western Hemisphere, here are the drugs, here's why these are bad guys, as opposed to the kind of simply taking kinetic action. In terms of the overall movement, President Trump got hired because he was going to put America first and get us out of endless wars. I think if you look at the United States record under Democrats and Republicans alike in terms of military interventions into Latin America, the record's pretty bad. And the Maduro regime is a bad government. We should have stood up more for the Venezuelan people when they voted overwhelmingly to throw out Maduro a year and a half ago. But I have been very disappointed, before we send sailors from Hampton Roads into harm's way, that the president needs to make clear what that mission is and how far he's willing to go.
Senator, the next question is from Nicholas Benton with the Falls Church News Press. Nicholas, are you there?
Yeah, hi. I want to ask about the meetings in Richmond now by the legislature to reorganize the congressional district boundaries in Virginia. I assume you support that. How do you see that playing out overall nationally? How's that going to resolve itself eventually? And how safe do you think the 2026 elections are going to be?
Well, I wish we could roll back the clock and not start this obvious political gerrymandering that started with the Texas redrawing of the map. I understand Democrats want to keep all options on the table. This is a very involved process in Virginia. It would actually require citizen weigh-in, changing the constitutional amendment that provided for nonpartisan redistricting. But it is a sad commentary that each state seems to be arming up. But it's equally, I completely understand the Democrats in Richmond saying we just can't watch as states all around us, like North Carolina, take action without even input of voters. So the Virginia process will be better with input of voters than other states. And in terms of the 26 elections, Nick, 4 or 5 months ago when people would ask me that question, I said, of course, that's a crazy question. I am increasingly worried about this president's efforts to try to undermine the political process, to try to wipe out all opposition. And I hope the best message we can send on that, I voted in this gubernatorial election. If we turn out in record numbers in Virginia and send a strong message that this is not the kind of America we want to live in, I think that message would be signified by a strong Abigail Spanberger victory. That would help maybe grow some spines with my Republican colleagues up here, because I know they are, many of them at least, are very concerned about this crass redistricting going on, but they're afraid to speak up. Maybe a big win in Virginia will give them a little more courage.
Senator, the next question is from Mark Gadd with CBS 19.
Hey, Senator, thanks so much for making the time to take the call. Just had a quick question just about, the effect of the government shutdown on national parks. So we've already, been seeing a lot of, trash pileups. And so what are your concerns about protecting natural resources and public safety in places like Shenandoah with no park staff and things like that? Listen,
I am worried that the shutdown, people can do damage. They can do damage to infrastructure. But I'm also worried about a lot of those businesses that are in park grounds, but get their business. This is kind of, we're a little bit past peak foliage, but this is a very busy time for the Shenandoah National Park. And I worry as well about those businesses that are just going to lose those revenues from the decline in park visitation. One more reason why we got to get the government reopened. We got to avoid this SNAP crisis that's coming this Saturday. We got to avoid the healthcare crisis that Virginians will feel firsthand coming this Saturday. I continue to appeal. President Trump, come home, get in a room with us, and let's resolve this.
The next question is from Nick Gilmore with WVTF. Nick, are you around? Okay, we'll move on to our last question from Amy Knowles with the Virginia Dogwood.
Hey, Senator Warner, thanks for taking our questions. Election day is getting close. So as a former Virginia governor, what's the hardest part of that job? And with that in mind, what would you like voters to consider before they cast their ballot in that race this year?
Well, thanks for the question. I think there's a couple things. And I remember getting hit with all this when I got elected. One, you realize you've only got 4 years. So you got to make every day work. Second, and I think this is the case for any governor, you got to find a way to work with folks in both parties. I mean, even if we have a Democratic majority in the House, we've got one in the Senate, I still think it's much better at the state level to see if you can find those bipartisan agreements. It means there's more buy-in then from Virginians across the board. And at the end of the day, one of the great things about being governor is you got to get stuff done. It is less partisan than the kind of crazy back and forth up here in D.C. So hire somebody that has got a record of getting stuff done that can work with both sides. And I think Abigail Spanberger meets that criteria. She was willing to push against the Democrats on issues she disagreed with. I think she also brings a strong national security background, which is so important in Virginia. So I know I voted, and I hope others will get out and do the same. It will be nothing better to also show on a macro basis that efforts to try to cut back voter turnout, and that's whether you vote for Spanberger or Winsome Sears. I hope we have the largest turnout in an off-year election in Virginia history. That would be a great signal that our democracy is alive and well.
Senator, that's all the time we have today.
Thank you so much, everybody. Be safe.